Channel 13. I worked the night shift as a patrol officer in a quiet Midwestern town. It's not exactly the kind of place where people lose sleep over crime. Petty theft, the occasional domestic disturbance, sure, but nothing big ever happens here. That's why it stood out when, a little after midnight, a voice crackled over the police radio. It wasn't from dispatch. The first sign something was wrong was the frequency. Channel 13. We don't use Channel 13. No one does. It's a dead channel. I remember asking about it during training, and the older officers just waved it off. No signal there, one of them said. Ghost frequency. So when the voice came through, I froze. Unit 7, come in. I stared at the radio in disbelief. That was my unit number. My partner, Steve, glanced over at me, one hand on the wheel. What the hell was that? I shook my head, reaching for the receiver. This is Unit 7, I said cautiously. Who's calling? The voice was distorted, almost metallic, like someone speaking through an old, broken speaker. We have a 1054 at 607 Hollow Ridge Road. Immediate response required. 1054, a possible fatality. But Hollow Ridge? The name sent a shiver down my spine. That place was on the far edge of town, a stretch of decaying farmland long abandoned. No one lived there anymore. Steve frowned. Dispatch didn't mention anything. You sure that's legit? Only one way to find out, I muttered. Against my better judgment, I relayed the address to dispatch. They came back confused. Negative Unit 7. There are no open calls for Hollow Ridge. Did you say Channel 13? Yeah, I said. Someone called it in. There was a pause. A long one. When dispatch came back, their voice was noticeably tense. Do not respond to that address. Repeat, do not respond to Hollow Ridge. Stay on patrol. I should have listened, but something about the voice, the way it called my unit number specifically, gnawed at me. What if someone was out there? What if they needed help? Steve, let's just check it out. 5 minutes in and out, I said, more to convince myself than him. He sighed. You're the boss. The road to Hollow Ridge was desolate, flanked by gnarled trees that seemed to close in the farther we went. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and rot. My chest felt tight, like something unseen was pressing down on me. We reached the address, a crumbling 2-story farmhouse surrounded by knee-high weeds. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The windows were shattered, the paint peeled down to gray wood. Looks abandoned, Steve said, shifting in his seat. He didn't sound eager to get out. Neither was I. Still, I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. Let's take a quick look. The wind howled as we approached the porch, carrying whispers that seemed to slither just out of earshot. My flashlight flickered as I stepped onto the creaking boards. Hello? I called, my voice sounding small against the vast emptiness. No answer. We pushed the door open. The inside smelled worse than the air outside, like mildew and decay. Dust hung in thick layers over everything. The floor groaned under our weight, and then the radio crackled again. Unit 7 status report, the distorted voice demanded. I froze. Steve looked at me, wide-eyed. Who the hell is that? He whispered. Who is this? I barked into the receiver, my voice trembling. Are you in the house? There was a pause, and then the voice came back, flat and chilling. I see you. Steve swore under his breath, drawing his weapon. I did the same. Where are you? I shouted. The response was immediate. Upstairs. My heart hammered in my chest. Steve shook his head, mouthing, let's leave. But something compelled me to move forward. Maybe it was pride, maybe stupidity, or maybe something darker. We climbed the staircase, the steps sagging under our boots. At the top, the hallway stretched out like a gaping mouth, doors on either side leading to shadowy rooms. The radio crackled again. Left room. I turned to the left. The door was slightly ajar. Steve, I began, but when I glanced back, he was gone. "Steve?" I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. No response. I called his name louder, but the house swallowed the sound. It felt like the walls were closing in, the shadows growing thicker. I was alone, or so I thought. The door to the left room creaked open wider, revealing nothing but blackness. My flashlight refused to work. "Unit 7, the voice rasped. "Come in." I raised the receiver to my lips with trembling hands. "Where's my partner?" "Inside." The words hit me like ice water. I stepped into the room. The darkness was alive. It wrapped around me, pulling me deeper until I couldn't see or feel anything. The air was electric, charged with a low hum that rattled my teeth. And then, I saw it. Steve, or what was left of him, hung in the center of the room, his face frozen in a silent scream. His body twisted unnaturally, as if something had bent him like a wire. Blood dripped from the ceiling, pooling at my feet. The radio crackled one last time. "Unit 7, your turn." I dropped the receiver and ran, or at least I tried. The house wouldn't let me leave. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't exist in this place. The house whispers to me now, in that same metallic voice. It tells me to wait, to call, and I do. "Unit 7, come in." The static-filled voice echoed in my ears, relentless and mocking. My throat felt raw from screaming, but no one came. No one ever would. The house had swallowed Steve whole, and now it had me. The radio in my hand came alive again. "Unit 7, come in." My voice cracked as I muttered, "Please, let me go." The response was immediate, calm, and cruel. "You are home now." I dropped the radio like it was burning my skin, stumbling backward into the shadows. The room twisted and shifted around me, the walls groaning and pulsing like the house itself was alive. I ran. Down the stairs, through the rotting foyer. My boots slammed against the floorboards, and with every step the house screamed louder. The air became thick, suffocating like wet tar clogging my lungs. I reached the front door and grabbed the handle, twisting it frantically. It didn't budge. "Please," I begged, pounding on the door with my fists. The voice returned, this time from everywhere and nowhere, as if it had seeped into the very walls. "Unit 7, return to your post." Behind me I heard footsteps. "Steve," I whispered, turning slowly. He stood at the base of the stairs, but it wasn't him anymore. His body hung at an unnatural angle, his arms dangling like a broken marionette. His eyes were gone, replaced by dark, empty sockets. His jaw unhinged, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice. "Stay," the thing inside him said. I stumbled back, slamming against the door. "You're not Steve," I whispered. "Steve is part of us now. You will be too." The house groaned, and something massive moved in the shadows behind him. It was as if the walls themselves shifted, the darkness congealing into a towering figure. I couldn't see its face, only the glint of too many teeth and eyes that gleamed like dying stars. "No!" I screamed, grabbing my flashlight and hurling it at the creature. It disappeared into the shadows, but Steve, or the thing wearing his body, kept coming. I had my gun. Shaking, I drew it, aiming at Steve's chest. "Don't make me do this," I warned, but he, or it, just laughed, the sound wet and gurgling. "You cannot kill what is already ours." I fired. The bullet hit him square in the chest, but he didn't stop. His body jerked with the impact, but it was like shooting a scarecrow. Something black and viscous oozed from the wound, dripping onto the floor, but Steve, or what remained of him, just kept advancing. I ran again, back through the house past rooms that weren't there before. Each door I passed opened on its own, revealing horrors I couldn't comprehend. A woman's face stretched across an entire wall, her mouth opening and closing silently. A room filled with mirrors reflecting a version of me that was rotting and decayed. A child sitting in the corner, their face obscured, but whispering my name. The house was alive. I reached the back door and slammed into it, fumbling with the lock. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't open, but then it gave way, and I stumbled out into the overgrown backyard. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was safe. I turned back to the house expecting to see Steve or whatever he'd become at the window, but the house wasn't there anymore. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with debris. No lights, no structure, just nothingness. I stared, my chest heaving. My hands shook as I reached for my radio, hoping, praying that someone would respond. Unit 7 to dispatch. I rasped. Please, someone respond. The radio crackled. Unit 7, this is dispatch. A calm, unfamiliar voice replied. What's your status? My words caught in my throat. I was at 607 Hollow Ridge. There was a call, but it's gone. The house is gone. Silence. Then the voice came back, sharper this time. Unit 7, you are mistaken. There is no Hollow Ridge in your jurisdiction. You've been off patrol for hours. Return to base immediately. No. My voice cracked. I was there. The house. My partner, Steve. Unit 7. The voice interrupted, now icy and detached. There is no partner assigned to your unit. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Steve. Unit 7. The voice cut in again. You've been patrolling alone for years. Return to base. The radio went silent. I stood there in the weeds, staring at the empty lot where the house should have been. My heart pounded as fragments of the night swirled in my mind, twisting and distorting like a fever dream. Had I imagined it? The voice? Steve? Number I looked at my hands, and my breath caught in my throat. They were covered in blood, thick and black, the same ooze that had poured from Steve's body. It dripped onto the ground, pooling at my feet. The radio crackled one last time. Unit 7, the distorted voice said, cold and final. Come home. And before I could respond, I heard the familiar creak of the farmhouse door behind me. It was back, and this time I knew I wouldn't leave.